Hello and welcome. You're watching the Kaleido Insights video series where we explore the impacts of COVID-19 on key themes that affect our lives as consumers, the future of businesses, and the ecosystems that we're all part of. I'm Jeremiah Owyang, an industry analyst and founding partner here at Kaleido Insights, and I'm joined by my two stellar business partners, Jaimy Szymanski and
Hello.
Jessica Groopman.
Hi there.
We are delighted to share this time with you, and we hope that you're staying healthy and well. Today's session, this is our third, we're going to be focusing on ambient computing. And we're going to be asking and answering this question: how are technologies digitizing the physical world around us that we interact with? So I'm going to ask Jaimy to kick things off. Jaimy.
Sure. I think the thing that's top of mind for all of us, for myself in particular, is once we do start getting out there, all right, once we do start returning a little bit back to normal, what about all of the existing germs on surfaces or in the air? How are we going to be dealing with that? I mean, pre-COVID-19, I was already a germaphobe, self-professed here. So I've been looking a lot into what types of technologies we're going to see sort of cross this barrier to make our physical lives better. I won't spend too much time on the first part because I know, Jess, you have a lot of thoughts about increased biometric monitoring, but I predict, based on the writing on the wall, we're going to see a lot greater use of existing technologies for new purposes. So we'll see things like, cameras right now that are being used for computer vision to spot, let's say, a loyal customer in a retail environment. Those same cameras will now be used combined with AI and thermal sensing to make sure you do not have a fever or a high body temperature before entering a retail location, a manufacturing environment, etc. If you've been to the store in any capacity in the recent few months, you probably also noticed the increased contactless kiosks. Good news is people were pretty much getting used to paying with their phones, in a lot of instances really going cashless. So that will continue to grow, I think, over the coming months as people return to the public. Beyond that, though, I'm really excited that public spaces will be more sanitized in general. I've been looking into some really cool technologies, everything, I would call from the smaller end of the spectrum, just automated aerosol sprays, for example. I mean, air fresheners do this now. We all see it, automated air fresheners in your home. Instead, it would spray disinfectant automatically. That's pretty low scale in terms of technology, though. And then working your way up, I was looking at this startup out of Syracuse called Eaglehawk, and they've developed a drone fleet that can spray disinfectant to quickly kill coronavirus in sports stadiums. So I thought that was great use of drones.
Amazing.
Drones sometimes, it's like public outcry in terms of the use of drones. But in this case, these drones were first created to spot holes in the tops of stadiums to make sure they could be repaired. And they pivoted in the wake of COVID-19, and they started using them for disinfectant. I don't know, you guys attend, sporting events often outside. I will say I'm not a huge sports buff, but it's still something to consider for other venues too. I also was looking into lights in general, like the ability for UV lights to disinfect through the rays themselves. There's a cool startup called Puro UV, and they make a disinfectant lighting. They're out of Lakewood, Colorado, and the light emits this broad spectrum UV that kills 99.9% of bacteria on surfaces just from the light, including COVID-19. They did test it. It was originally made, I guess, to disinfect hospital rooms. And again, it was made for one purpose and then pivoted from there. A couple other ones, we've all seen these wandering robots that are being used, and now they're being used not just for cleaning, but also for sanitation. For example, Pittsburgh International Airport, they had the very first UV sanitation robot that roamed the terminal after hours. That was pretty cool. And then finally, I was considering, what about the air itself, though? I'm talking about surfaces and, sanitizing your hands and whatnot, not touching your face, wearing gloves, et cetera. What about the air? Emerging technologies are coming out around the realm of bipolar ionization, it's called. There's a Connecticut-based company called Atmos Air that they have a bipolar ionization air treatment system that they've deployed in about 40 sports venues and other larger arenas and stadiums. And the ions that are put into the air act like fresh air, reducing the amount of outside or internal air that is circulated for the cleaning process. So I think it's really interesting because apparently they identified that there are protein spikes in coronavirus molecules that are really easily taken over by the ions. So there's a lot of cool new technologies that, like I said, a germaphobe like me is very excited about getting back out there.
It's fascinating too, because in so many ways this was, hardly on the radar of most of us, and certainly many types of environments,
Totally.
sports venues, music, retail, whatever, prior to this. So it's really interesting to watch some of these kind of, I wouldn't call it a new sector, but a growth within an existing sector, perhaps in an unexpected way. And I think, Jaimy, you did such a good job of kind of articulating. We talk about ambient computing. There are drones, there's aerosol, there's the air itself, there are robots, there are all these different kind of form factors. But I think it's also important to say, okay, if we're talking about ambient computing or ambient intelligence, what's the difference with IoT? What do biometrics have to do with it? And, one of the things that's sort of difficult to understand about it is that there are so many different devices. It is the digitization of essentially anything, any physical object, or even for that matter, aerosol object, I guess you could call it. But it's sort of two things. It's electronic environments that are sensitive and responsive to individuals, to devices themselves, to the environment itself, and then also learning over time. So this is the critical thing, I think, for us to talk about ambient intelligence. It is both the sensing and the learning and intelligence over time. Now, I'm here to talk about biometrics. This is an area I cover very closely. And when we talk about ambient intelligence or ambient computing, it's one thing, of course, to have a robot or a drone or a screen, but it's quite another for our own biometrics to be that interface, for our own biome to be the computing environment. My question is, will biometric monitoring now become the norm? As we are increasingly, as we go back to work, perhaps, or into the retail environments, encountering things like thermometer screening. I think this is now a recommendation of the CDC at this point. As we are increasingly interacting with telehealth services, prior to this pandemic, it was something less than a third of people had done any sort of telehealth service at all. Now, increasingly, these services are not just becoming more widespread, but are collecting different types of biometrics. Maybe it's a heart rate monitor, maybe it's through an AI-powered camera, all sorts of different biometrics. There's an example of a wearable called the Oura Ring, which is actually being used right now to analyze whether or not we can predict the symptoms of COVID before they begin to manifest, before they come on. We've seen examples of facial recognition, maybe when we're not wearing masks, but actually using recognition to essentially snap a selfie and see what your body temperature is. So there's all these new kinds of biometric interfaces that are starting to dictate what information is being gathered, and potentially whether or not we can enter an environment, how we can move about a working environment. I came across a company the other day called Smart Mimic. And this is a workplace application who is designing contact tracing specifically to maintain social distancing in a workplace, in a factory environment, or in a retail environment. So there's the IoT component to that. But again, it's all about sort of how are we using individuals within a given environment, in this case, to maintain safety.
So to bring both of your excellent points, Jaimy and Jessica, together, I've done work with the automobile industry and also with the airline industry. So they could use components of both of these, the digital cleansing and the biometrics. I'd love to hear your thoughts, actually. Could we see a car that could emerge that has UV lights, just as we see the mood lighting stripping on the modern new cars, like the LED blue lights? We might see that, or it might self-clean at night.
Or in ride sharing, I'm thinking, right? Like think about Uber. Wouldn't you feel so much better getting into an Uber right now if you knew they had UV lights that were cleaning the surfaces the second it got out? So you don't have to trust the driver to be spraying it down or something like that. I would love it to be seamless. I think that's what's going to be important about this.
And I think same thing with the seats in airplanes too. Are the UV lights present? And we might see some type of digital certification. When was the seat cleaned and to what depth? Jessica?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with the point on ride sharing and any kind of shared services, Airbnb, anything where we are sharing particular assets or infrastructure. Absolutely. I was just driving yesterday and I saw a sign for a brand new business that hadn't opened, but it made very clear in the signage that it had been, standardized with COVID cleansing capabilities. And this is, a brand new business. So I think that this will become part of the expectation. Gosh, I can't remember. It was a retail environment. Right? Yeah. I can't remember if it was a restaurant or what, but that was some of the clear messaging.
Yeah, some of the restaurants that I visited, they put up, it almost looks like a bank now. They have the whole plastic wall with the speakers in and out on how you order things, and it's a very new thing. Okay, anything else to add on that?
No.
All right, I have kind of a mixed bag in some of the articles that I brought forward, and part of ambient computing is thinking about 5G and IoT, but also beyond the consumer side, also in automation, and the term called digital twins. First, some stats. Fast Company recently reported that there is some optimistic forecast, specifically from Ericsson, that they want to see 65% of the world's population to have 5G by 2025. But 25% of that will come from sharing the 4G spectrum. But still, that would be 90% is net new 5G. That's pretty optimistic, and so we'll see if that will come to light.
I think it is too. I feel like I saw the same stat a few years ago, but the year was 2021, and now they're just like,
we're just pushing the can down the road. Got it. But of course, it makes sense for a tech company to make such grand pronouncements. I'm sure their stock goes up when they do things like that. The second thing is, I was on a private call with manufacturing leaders. I mentioned this in our prior video around using automation in exchange of having human workers because they're not going to get sick. And the appetite for this is very low. In fact, many of the automation programs stopped completely. They were not investing in automation in the manufacturing center. And there was around 20 people on the call, although only around several of them chimed in. So I think that's because budgets were frozen because there's a recession. So maybe we might see the push towards automation. So in the net of this being in the manufacturing center, expecting automation to emerge to replace sick workers in this year, it's not what we heard from actual leaders.
I think about the definition of automation though, and I think it's a huge spectrum in terms of what we're automating here. So in the realm of we talked a lot about automation, was it last video or the time before? I'm thinking about just in terms of ambient computing though. What if you think of automation just in terms of the automating of the analysis or putting in some of these cameras like Jess mentioned to make sure that manufacturing workers are social distancing, or using automation to analyze the video feed that's coming in rather than people trying to, that kind of stuff. I'm thinking, well, that might be a little bit better. I was looking at a few articles prior to this call about, I guess, the business case for using existing cameras that maybe right now are security cameras, but using them for thermal monitoring, for example. And it can cost maybe like $1,000, right, for the entire year annually for the service using existing cameras. And obviously, it's a lot cheaper than dedicating staff. It can be safer, especially when we see now, some of these security guards that are just doing their job and trying to enforce social distancing, and their lives are being threatened. So it can be safer in that way, and in the end of the day, it's more accurate too. So I wonder if some of those benefits and the cost structure, $1,000 is nothing compared to a full-time employee.
I spoke with the Amazon Alexa product manager, and they are rolling out the Amazon Show. It's the device with the camera in it in hospitals, and all you need is Wi-Fi access. There's no expensive infrastructure to roll that out. So that's a perfect example, Jaimy, to bring that to light.
Well, the point that you're making, Jeremiah, around infrastructure is crucial, because one of the kind of paradoxes of ambient intelligence is that it actually requires quite a bit of infrastructure very often, and 5G has a big role in this. But when we talk about telehealth or applications in healthcare and any industry for that matter, the trade-offs for sort of invisible computing or contactless or touchless or a robot driving by or whatever is often on the kind of heavy infrastructure side. So
thank you. And that leads to this also interesting insight. I was on Mickey McManus's and Peter Hirschberg's video show, and Mickey McManus, I think you know who he is. He's a fantastic thinker. And he gave me a wonderful quote around the digital twins. So digital twins, actually, Jessica, can you please give the definition or an example?
Sure. Essentially the idea is this is the ability to mathematically replicate anything, a device, a lung, fill in the blank, so as to better use it into simulations and software and development and so forth.
That's right. And so to Jaimy's point, the hardware is not required for this. You can do this in software in VR, which that's part of Jaimy's coverage area. So the quote that Mickey McManus said is, we shouldn't call them digital twins. They're actually crash test dummies, and we can have thousands, if not millions. His whole thing is billions and trillions, by the way. So we can use those to make all these simulations before actually applying anything into the physical world. And I thought that was a really apt way to think about that. So crash test dummies are actually the digital twins, so we don't have to technically crash ourselves.
I like that definition better.
Yeah, I do too. I do too. It is more fun, and no humans get hurt in this virtual scenario. I was also on a different podcast with the former product manager of Amazon Go, and Jaimy, you were speaking about contactless services, and yes, Amazon did make a motion or Q4, I think 2019, about how they're going to make their technologies available for many retailers, and that is contactless checking out. So they are deploying that now and helping retailers to do this. So we should expect to see that Amazon Go experience in many places. By the way, I did do a silly test. I went to an Amazon Go store and to see how fast I could grab something, pay for it with the app and everything. Do you want to guess my time?
I know you're pretty fast. I don't know.
14 seconds.
Okay, you guys, that's a really good guess. It was 5 seconds.
Oh, wow. Wow.
I don't really know what I grabbed until I got to the store. So it happened to be Greek yogurt. So the point is, you can do this very fast. And actually, the Amazon Go product manager, she goes, actually, that's too fast. And I actually don't want that story getting out, because retailers want you to stay in the store.
Of course.
So there's a real dynamic here. Don't stay out too long. Don't stay in too long. Okay, so the last story that really caught my eye around ambient computing is Bose announced a new pricing model around their noise canceling headphones, which are really important as people work from home during a quarantine due to COVID-19, or they might be out working somewhere else in the near future. And they want to do, there's a new app that they launched called the Noise-O-Meter, and depending how loud your environment is, you will get a reduction in the price of the product. So that's truly using ambient computing for real-time pricing based upon the environment you're around. And Jessica, in the blockchain world, micropayments, is something that you've explored in your research as well. So you can see how we could use that data to change things. Any reactions to that?
So is this going to happen with, people who need eyeglasses like myself? So if I have a less strong prescription, I should get a discount?
See, this gets into ageism and genetic factors
right?
real
why
quick.
Is this happening
Real quick.
Why can't your eyeglasses automatically adjust the prescription based on scanning your eye? It should be able to do that too, right?
Maybe we could change the algorithm to listen for annoying sounds too, right? And then you get a discount on that.
It's true. The ability to somehow atomize based on ambient environment or ambient computing is perhaps a whole new realm for pricing, for prescriptions, for business models, for our own data, many different areas to explore there.
Yeah, and I think that is the great summary of today's discussion, is that ambient computing helps us to digitize the world around us, and then we can personalize it for each person. Mass personalization is one term that we definitely hear in the space, and so we could get a smarter world. Well, thank you everybody for this discussion. Thank you, Jaimy. Thank you, Jessica, for your insightful contributions. You can learn more about our insights on our blog and website related to ambient computing and our other 4 research themes on kaleidoinsights.com. So join us every week on a periodic basis, and we will be covering how COVID-19 impacts your business and the economy and society. Thank you for watching.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Stay well.
Bye-bye.